Thank you for joining us tonight. This is the last of our Q&A sessions for candidates seeking Twin Cities DSA endorsement in our second round of consideration for 2022. Today we are joined by Amane Badhasso. They are a candidate for the Minnesota 4th Congressional District, running against the current incumbent, Representative Betty McCollum. This is an opportunity for Twin Cities DSA members to ask questions to candidates seeking our endorsement and to consider their answers before our endorsement meeting and vote. So this is the opportunity for folks to ask questions that will help you make a decision about whether the chapter should make an endorsement in this race. So the format for this evening, we are going to begin with an introduction from Amane, and then we are going to move to some pre-submitted questions from membership. While I am going through those, we are going to have a form up in the chat that anyone listening in can submit a question to. We will get to those questions in the second half after we have gone through the pre-submitted ones. This is the last of our Q&As, and the next step of the process will be for members to meet and discuss the potential of endorsements. That will be tomorrow at 6:30, and we hope that members will both attend that meeting as well as be engaged and discuss the decision in other forums, including the chapter Slack channel. After the meeting, the endorsement ballot, which will be conducted by OPA will be emailed out to members, who will then have 1 week until April 6th to respond with their decisions and with which candidates you feel that the chapter should endorse, if any. All right, I will put the link in the chat for everyone. And I believe that's everything on my end. So I will turn that over to Amane for a brief introduction.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Timothy. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. I'm so honored to be here with all of you comrades today. I think we share the same vision of the kind of country and state we want to live in. And so just honored to be here. I wanted to reiterate that. My name is Amane Badhasso. I use she, her pronouns, and I am honored to be running to represent the working class families of the 4th District in Congress. I am a refugee who moved to the 4th District from Ethiopia, fleeing violence and political persecution when I was a kid. And of course, Minnesota has been my home ever since. Like many in the 4th District, I am a renter and a working class woman. I know for a fact that Minnesotan families are struggling, and my district deserves a representative who will build power for our diverse communities, lead with co-governance as a priority, and one who will always put the 4th District first by fighting courageously in Congress for important wins. My agenda is focused on our working class families. I will fight and organize for Medicare for all and cancel student loan debt. I also believe in investing tremendously in our small businesses, communities, and transforming our economy with the Green New Deal. And I know that you all know now more than ever, we must build an economy that actually works for workers, not the 1%. My candidacy is quite unique, as many of you might know. I am an organizer, not a politician. I was raised by a community whose way of survival was because of community organizing, collaboration, and a politics centered on love and abundance. My story is one that will connect with a unique coalition here in the district, District 4. I'm a Black woman from an immigrant family, a refugee. I come from a working class background and have lived paycheck to paycheck myself as an organizer. I am a millennial, and the struggles impacting and facing folks in my district, such as economic inequality and economic instability. We are in a moment where, there's a racial justice reckoning. The price of college, and many of us are shackled by student loan debt, me being one of them as well. We are now faced with a climate that is changing dramatically, and certainly leadership without the necessary urgency to actually make a difference. Ultimately, my candidacy is not only a challenge to the status quo, but it's about actually having somebody in Washington that will prioritize our working class families, somebody that will be a bolder and a courageous leader, somebody who's not beholden to special interest. I do imagine a vastly different style of leadership, one that is rooted in community, one where organizing is critical, not only during election cycles, but all year round. And I do believe that I am ready and prepared to take on an agenda that will finally address the many disparities that our communities face, and one that will actually work towards building an economy and a country that stands for workers and not the oligarchs that control our nation. Thank you so much.
All right. So starting off with our pre-submitted questions, the first one that we have is, have you received any additional endorsements since submitting your questionnaire for our endorsement? And I think this refers to question 5, where we had asked which endorsements you had received so far.
Yeah, as I mentioned to all of you, I am somebody who is taking on a member of Congress that's been there 21 years, understanding that this is a challenge to not only giving our folks a representative that will stand for our working class families, but also one that is challenging the status quo. My current endorsement happens to be my campaign chair, Council Member Nelsie Yang. And we're still building the necessary power to continue to bring on folks so that we can get as many progressives on board as possible.
Thank you. And then the next question that we have is, could you elaborate why you said on your questionnaire that you would not identify as a democratic socialist?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I am somebody who believes that I share the same values as DSA, primarily as it relates to fighting for an economy that actually works for workers, that we need to be bolder on fighting against the special interest of the fossil fuel industry so that we can actually save our planet and make sure that we get to have the Green New Deal implemented. I do believe that I will be somebody that will be an ally, somebody that will organize our community so that we can actually build people power over the powers that currently run Washington. And ultimately, my submission to get the endorsement is because I do believe that I will be an ally to DSA in Washington, and somebody that ultimately will not take a dime of corporate PAC money. And so, since our vision aligned, I found it best to seek this really critical and important partnership in order for us to really have the necessary wins that we need to have. We need to partner with folks who are on the ground actually building people power. And I do believe that DSA is doing that, which is why, this endorsement is critical and important to me personally.
All right, shifting away from the questions on the questionnaire, the next question that we have is, what role do you think the U.S. government should play in supporting Palestinian liberation?
We consider ourselves a democracy, and a democracy cannot sit idle by watching human rights violations continue to be committed. I am somebody that believes that we need international solidarity with the Palestinian people and their fight for the struggle of liberation. And ultimately, as a democracy, we have to hold our ally accountable, and we have to make sure that we don't just say that we want Palestinian liberation, that we actually do everything within our power to make sure that's a reality.
Thank you. And next question that we have, could you describe your relationship to the Democratic Party and the relationship that you envision to Democratic leadership in the House?
So I am a DFLer and have worked for the party for quite some time. I started organizing with the DFL in 2009 and have been on and off working on campaigns. And most recently, I was the regional organizing director on the coordinated campaign. I started organizing because I believed that we needed to make sure that our working class families get the necessary wins that they need. And as you all know, the Democratic Party here has a long way to go before we actually start prioritizing our working class families. For me, the part that I really wanted to actually prioritize was the organizing, was the hearing of the important and critical stories that a lot of our working class families are telling us as organizers on the doors. There is relationship there, but certainly I'm committed to making sure that we hold our party accountable. And I do believe we have a long way to go before, we ultimately say that we are the party of the working class. There are important critical wins that folks in the House should have fought for. Quite frankly, the Build Back Better agenda was an agenda that was, ultimately brought to the table because our working class families were struggling. And I think there's still a lot of work that the leadership could have done to ensure that passed. And so my relationship will be one that will be holding our party and its leaders accountable. And that's why, I've committed to not taking a dime of special interest or corporate PAC money, because I do believe we need a new generation of leadership that will actually fight for those things that we've been hearing about for decades, and yet no work seems to proceed. I applaud what has been done so far, but I think we have a long way to go. And my leadership in Washington will be one of holding them accountable as opposed to, letting things be as they are.
All right. Next question that we have is, if elected, what would you envision your relationship with TCDSA would be like?
Absolutely. So that goes to why I submitted an interest in seeking this endorsement. We have to build people power. And ultimately, the way we get the Green New Deal, the way we will get Medicare for all, the way we will actually take money out of politics so that we can get those important wins is by organizing. It's by challenging the institutions that exist. It's about reimagining the horrifying systems that continue to hurt our Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. And I do believe that the necessary organizing work, the necessary question of the institutions that be, that's being undertaken by DSA. And ultimately, for me, it's about partnership, it's about building alliances, and it's about being active in the community so that we could continue to increase not only memberships within the Democratic Party, but also in DSA, right? We're talking about a challenge to really powerful institutions and systems of capitalism. And we can't do that until we start thinking about co-governance, until we start thinking about building people power. And that starts on the doors. That starts when we actually can build an organizing system that is all year round, right? That's not only showing up during election cycles, but one that is truly committed to building people power. And I think you're all doing that so far. And I would love to partner to continue that work, whether I am elected or not, quite frankly.
All right. Then the next question that we have, over the weekend at the Senate District 65 DFL convention, endorsed DSA candidate Shay Freeberg was seeking the DFL endorsement. Could you speak to what, if any, assistance your campaign provided to Shay's campaign?
That's an excellent question. So Shay and I share the same vision for not only empowering our labor movement and increasing membership and ensuring that it's diverse, but he's also somebody who has been an ardent supporter of the East African community, of which I am a member. And we've had a relationship and friendship before the campaign, and ultimately we had some challenges with credentials in SD 65, and we fought really hard. Not only challenging the status quo, but going up against the party machine to say that, we can't be a party that talks about inclusiveness and ultimately have some leaders at the local level that are challenging that and ensuring that our folks are disenfranchised. And so we have a collective interest in empowering our communities and have worked together to make sure that those folks that their rights were protected. And in fact, they were reinstated to be delegates. And that was a remarkable win. And we couldn't have done that without the support of Shay and his remarkable team that truly believed that our, DFL convention process should be as inclusive as one can be.
Thank you. The next question that we have, if elected, how will you maintain accountability to the movement and your constituents and use your influence and power to those ends?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I am somebody that, for the longest time, right, I've always believed that corporate PAC donations, dark money donations, international corporations throwing money into our politics was a form of bribery. And I also happen to think that a lot of folks in Washington who solely rely on big pharma money or fossil fuel industry money or corporate PACs, they're essentially lobbyists for these interests, right? I am somebody who committed to not a dime of corporate PAC money, special interest money. In the first quarter of me running, challenging somebody that is, a member of the establishment, truly, because they do accept corporate PAC money and special interest money from the defense industry. I outraised my opponent of over 21 years, a majority of my donations coming from District 4. That means that I will be the candidate that will be accountable to the people. And ultimately, if we want to talk about Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, or actually transforming our economy so it works for our workers and not the 1%, we have to get money out of our politics. And so not only am I an organizer that believes that we should organize all year round, that we should ultimately go to Washington to challenge the institutions, not be their partners, because there's tremendous changes that are necessary for us to have the important wins. But, unless you're fully funded by grassroots, right, you're accountable to certain interests. and I'm fully funded by grassroots dollars. And I do believe that ultimately my priorities will be the priorities of the 4th District. And I think that's the signal that we have to send as the new generation of leadership, not only within our party, but also just in general. We have to get money out of our politics, and that's what I'm committed to. And I think that's what I've been doing. And ultimately, I certainly have nobody that I will be accountable outside of the people that will send me there. And that's the people of the 4th District.
All right. That is the last of our pre-submitted questions. I'd like to remind everyone who's listening in that if you go to the form in the chat, you can submit a question for us to ask now that we have reached the second half. And with that, I'm going to move over to some that we have gotten at this point. And the first one we have is, how would you fight back against the accusation that support for BDS, the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions movement, is anti-Semitic?
Yeah, that's an important question. I think a fight where you are calling for sanctions against an entity or power that is committing human rights violation, if that's considered, anti-Semitic, I think it's wrong. When you look at the movement against apartheid, one of the central messages that was sent was a lot of folks really understood that they had to target those entities that were committing gross human rights violations. We have to be really serious about, in the 21st century, the notion that never again, right? That's stated all year round. That's been stated throughout history. We're in a moment where a lot of countries are enduring gross human rights violations. A lot of people are being undermined. A lot of people are being dehumanized. And I think we have to really think about what it means for us to fight for justice, what it means for us to defend democracy. We cannot in good conscience, right, say that we're defending and protecting human rights when we're undermining a nonviolent way of actually calling out atrocities, a nonviolent way of actually holding states and entities that commit human rights violations accountable. I am somebody that will ensure that everyone's rights is protected. Should it be in question that, one cannot call out gross human rights violations. I find it absurd.
All right. Next question that we have. President Biden has recently proposed an $813 billion defense budget. If you were in Congress, what would be your position on this defense budget?
Thank you for the question. I am challenging someone who is chair of appropriations for defense. Here's the reality. The reality is Americans are struggling. Working class folks are struggling across this country. We were in the middle of a global pandemic, and we couldn't get the necessary wins for folks that were struggling. And I think in this moment, we don't need to increase defense budget. I quite frankly believe that we should decrease it. All of that access money that's going to defense could be going into education, could be going into healthcare, could be going into actually canceling student loan debt. So a lot of us, particularly Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks who don't come from wealth, right, as a result of systemic oppression, could actually have access to the American dream. And so that money could be well spent in empowering and sustaining our working class families. And I don't think the Pentagon needs additional budget. Certainly they have enough.
Sorry, I think they were trying to get to a more concrete. Would you vote for or against the defense budget?
I would vote against it.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. Just going to remind the audience again, if you have any questions, the Google form is in the chat, and please feel free to submit them. Okay. I have gotten this one a couple of times. I think I covered it, but it has rephrased itself in this. I suppose I'll ask it again and see. Actually, folks who are asking why Amane is seeking the endorsement of a socialist organization when she doesn't consider herself a socialist. I believe I addressed that in the second question that I asked. So this meeting is being recorded and it will be available for members to review later on. Okay. So this one. Okay. So this question is going back a little bit. In the American Rescue Plan, there had been the opportunity for a the inclusion of a $15 minimum wage, which was not included in it, which set back a movement that is overwhelmingly popular. What do you think about the circumstances around that situation?
Yeah, I think the circumstances are, it goes back to influence of money in our politics. We have folks who are members of our party who don't seem to think that in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a moment where, predatory landlords are continuously increasing rent, where wages remain stagnant, but expenses are certainly not, that they feel as though 15 minimum is too much of a high aspiration. I think it's as a result of various things. One of it is failure to prioritize working class families. The other is the belief that perhaps this is not necessary, which means that we have politicians in Washington who are out of touch with the everyday life of working class families. And this is why we need more progressives in office who are not beholden to special interests and who can actually prioritize a living wage. A lot of us know, we've lived off of 15 minimum. It's certainly not indexed to inflation. I think we have to start talking about a living wage. What does it mean to live in 2021 or 2022 and survive, right? And I think we have to talk about an economy that works for workers, and certainly the fact that we can get 15 minimum and this really critical and important legislation means that we have folks in Washington that aren't prioritizing our working class families. This is why we organize all year round. This is why we must talk about, a living wage, one that actually is a reflective of the current economy that we're in. And it's disappointing. It's extremely disappointing. I would have certainly supported it and done everything that I could to make sure that we were able to pass that. But unfortunately, our leadership just they don't understand what working class families are going through. That's what I genuinely believe.
Okay. Next question that we have. I'm going to shorten this one a bit just to get to the main part of the question. What is your opinion on the potential of a two-state solution in Israel?
I am somebody who, I moved to the United States. I was in transition in Kenya for a very long time. I am from Ethiopia, a country really devastated by ongoing civil wars, including now where nearly 1 million people have died within 2 years as a result of a civil war. I think we need a lasting solution with regards to the conflict in Israel-Palestine. I think we have to prioritize human dignity and humanity. And ultimately, for me, peace is the last resolution. And if peace can be attained by a two-state solution, certainly I believe in that. But we also have to make sure that we stop ongoing settlements, that we respect the dignity and humanity of Palestinian people, and especially Palestinian children that are constantly under attack. And I think as a collective, we have to think about what would put an end to the suffering. And certainly I would be on board with anything that would put an end to the suffering here.
Okay, next question that we've had come in. Your opponent has the firm backing of the labor movement, and how would you work with labor while in power to develop a relationship and build that trust?
No, that's an excellent question. So labor built this country, and labor faces tremendous challenges. And so if we want to talk about an economy that actually works for workers, I think the best ally and partner you can have in Washington is somebody that is grassroots funded, somebody that has time and time again out fundraised a sitting incumbent that takes corporate PAC donations. And certainly, right, incumbents have the upper hand when it comes to getting various endorsements. But as somebody who is the anti-poverty candidate, as somebody who has lived in poverty, I do believe that the best way we can fight back as working class folks is to empower labor, to increase memberships in labor, to make sure that we have collective bargaining for any and everybody that seeks it. But ultimately, the best ally and supporter of labor is somebody that's not backed by special interest. And so I believe that I will be somebody that, you know, will use organizing as a way to make sure that we get those important wins, that, you know, we can partner better with labor to make sure that we fight back against attacks by corporations who certainly are restless when it comes to attacking labor all year round.
Thank you. Next question we have submitted. Do you support lifting the sanctions which are on Cuba and Venezuela?
That is an excellent question. So I am somebody who believes that sanctions should be targeted to heads of state and entities that are committing human rights violations. And to this question, I actually would support lifting sanctions so that we can make sure that the people are not suffering, because ultimately those who are going to be impacted by these sanctions are working class folks. We need to build a world where we have solidarity across the board, especially as working class folks, with others across the world. And I think lifting those sanctions will be critical to making sure that, you know, we are able to sustain the economy of those countries. But most importantly for me, ensuring that we sustain those families that are hard hit by these sanctions.
All right. So that is the last one that we have submitted at the moment. I think I will give it just a second to see if any more roll in. We are a little bit under time at the moment, so I'm just going to say while we have a moment for folks listening in, the next steps after this Q&A are going to be the endorsement meeting tomorrow, and that is going to be at 6:30. We'll be discussing our endorsement potentials and the pros and cons of what the endorsements chapter is considering. And after that, there will be an open vote ballot sent out to membership, which will be open for a week until April 6th for folks to submit their responses to. And that will be the next steps for our process. Okay. I think we'll end with this question. Someone has submitted a question of what is your favorite St. Paul restaurant?
That's an excellent question. Bole Ethiopian restaurant. If you guys have not checked out Bole Ethiopian restaurant, you should check it out. I'm a huge fan of Ethiopian food, not only because I'm from there, but I think, you know, the veggies are awesome. So Bole and St. Paul.
Okay, that looks like everything that we have submitted. So I think with that, we will close out our event. Amane Badhasso, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you. Have a great night.
Bye, everyone.